much for doing this, man.
No
This
problem.
podcast is about your journey in music, how you got to where you are now.
Sure.
Cool. I did see you're from Canada.
Yeah.
Born and raised?
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
I was born in Sarnia, Ontario, which is a really working class town right on the border with Michigan, right across the river from Port Huron, Michigan. So
Oh, okay.
Detroit was the city we went to if we were going to the city.
Mhm.
And so I grew up in America a lot. A lot of my friends were American growing up. But yeah, it was, it's like my dad worked in construction and my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and it's a really nice, safe town. And actually, my childhood home just went up for sale today. Someone sent me a list for my childhood home. I haven't lived there I got to look through it just like literally like an hour and a half ago. I got to look through all these. Yeah, it was wild. It looks nothing. Of course, it's been renovated.
Sure.
And
It was weird clicking through the photos and stuff.
Yeah, I was like personally offended by all the photos. I like they removed the wood paneling in the basement. I was like, big mistake. It's gonna roll back around in fashion. And
yeah, right.
There really was only one thing that I recognized, which is these cupboards, sort of hung cupboards on the wall of the basement where we kept all our board games, and they're still there. But other than that, everything else ripped out. It was sad to see.
That is. How long did you live in that house?
Until I left for university. So until I left at 18. So yeah, for my whole 18 years.
Yeah, that was my parents, fortunately still have, they've had the same house. I grew up in 35 years now. So
that's incredible.
Yeah,
my parents moved.
To see somebody buy it, like how you're saying.
Yeah. And then someone else was flipping it around. And my parents moved when I was in university, and my sister and I were in university. I remember they called us and were like, well, we're going to move out of the old house. And we were both, my sister and I were like, oh God, we got to see it one more time. And they're like, we already did it. Like we're done. They didn't even tell us they had just like done it all. So then that was it. We never got to see it
bummer. Yeah, I know. I've always had that thought in my head, like, that's just so weird. Like somebody buying up your old house or whatever. But then there's all those people that move, twice a year, and it's like, whatever.
Yeah, a lot of people are used to it.
Right on, man. So how did you get into music originally?
Well, I played guitar when I was a kid, and my sister told me to play the guitar so that I could, get girls. She was like, nothing else is going on in the sports department, and you're not good looking in any way, so you should get some marketable skill. And so I did. I was like, she's serious. So I got a guitar. My mom gave me an old guitar that she had. She played when she was younger. And I had been using the guitar as a G.I. Joe bass, and we went and got strings put on it. And then I started to take lessons. And I only took lessons for like 4 months, really like, and I just learned all the chords, basically like the normal sort of cowboy chords. And then I immediately started making up songs because I just didn't know what else to do. And I've done it ever since. But I never thought I would be a musician. I went through most of my adolescence not thinking that. I remember thinking that I would like to be a songwriter, and that whether there was a job where you could just write songs and then other people sang them. And one of the first things I looked up when we got the internet was, is that a job? And I remember learning about Warner Chappell and the publishing houses and those types of people at that time, and thinking like, oh, great, that's a job. I'll just do that.
Yeah. Well, then you ended up getting on Warner Chappell years later. So got to put that out in the air for you. Cool. I want to talk about that for sure. So you started writing music right away. You weren't really into learning other people's songs?
I did. I learned like, Come As You Are, and, Pearl Jam songs like Yield. These are my campfire staples, that I pulled out when I was in my teens and 20s.
Mm-hmm.
But I just, more so than the other guys I knew who played guitar, my other friends, they were obsessed with like figuring out how to play, like Eric Clapton solos, and Eric Clapton Unplugged was really popular, and they were trying to figure out how to play like the way he does the Layla riff or whatever the hell. Just never. That stuff never appealed to me, and pedals and that stuff had never appealed to me. It still doesn't. And I just immediately wanted to write songs, but I didn't play them for anyone. I was mostly ashamed of what I was doing. I was writing songs about girls that were in my class, and I didn't want anyone to know because I would have been branded a loser, which I was. Yeah.
Well, then when did you did you start a band or anything, or you just kept all that
kind
of in your house?
I was in a cover band when I was in high school, but it wasn't good, and I wasn't the singer. I was just the guitar player.
Okay.
I remember the guy who was the singer was not a very good singer, and I remember thinking all the time, I was like, I should probably, but he was not into that idea. So
he wanted to be the front man.
Yeah, man, it was his band, and we practiced in his basement. So, like, what am I gonna do? You know?
Sure. So, when did you start writing songs and performing them to other people?
Well, that took a long time. I went to theater school for university English. I took English and drama. Oh, okay. And I thought that I wanted to be an actor, and I don't like thinking about that now at my advanced age. I can't fathom why I thought I wanted to do that. I don't want to do that at all. Like the thought of it right now makes me, I don't know what that's what I try to impart to my kids are, not my kids are young, but really young, but teenagers who are like, I'm trying to think about what I want to do. I was like, listen, I don't even remember being your age. Like I literally don't remember it. Sure. So I didn't, there's going to be twists and turns here. Like I had thought that I wanted to be an actor. I cannot fathom what I was thinking. I don't like to be photographed. I don't like to be videotaped. Like, what the fuck was I thinking? Can I swear on this podcast?
Yeah, of course.
I just couldn't, I don't know. And I got out of theater school. I liked theater school. I met a lot of friends and I had a really good time. And then I I went to like another theater school. I got kicked out of it because I was not really, it was a pretty serious thing and I was not taking it very seriously. And so I moved to the city. I moved to Toronto, and then I acted in commercials for a number of years. I was in a bunch of Coors Light commercials and stuff.
Really? So you're obviously pretty good at acting. I mean, you're saying that you
don't think so.
Want to be on TV, but you may.
I mean, it doesn't take much acting skill to just stand there with a beer and go like, "Yeah, man," like it's nothing. I just have a face of a regular dude. I think that's all I was succeeding at. So I did that for a couple of years. And then I was as the impossibility of that career settled into my mind, I decided to go for another really safe bet, which was to be a musician. I had always been writing songs all along, just not taking it seriously. And then I started to record things and trying to take it seriously. And then I wrote a lot of songs, probably 100 before I thought any of them were good. And then I started to sort of put the ones that were good up on the internet on MySpace. It was sort of like the waning out days of MySpace. And I got like some attention from some blogs. And then
This is without performing? This was all just you sitting at home recording the songs and putting them up online?
Yeah, I hadn't performed any shows at that point. I think I started opening for people just after that. But people were downloading them on the internet, and my MySpace plays were going up in a way that was more significant than my friends. So I was like, I think people would like what I'm doing here. So I kept sort of pushing at it. And then I started to open for people around Toronto and play. And then for a long while I did that, like for a really long time, and then I played just bar gigs. I played like country covers nights at this bar under a fake name. I played under the name Luke Kowalchuk. I thought that it would be interesting to be a whole different guy. And I would play a bunch of Garth Brooks songs. And I used to get like $175 for that for like an hour. And then,
wow.
Yeah, if I did that like 2 times a month, that was like my rent.
Sure.
And then I would record my own music and do that on the side, and had a lot of other really crappy jobs. And sort of, I don't know. Do you want to ask another question, or should I keep going? I can keep telling the story. Am I talking too much?
No, this is perfect.
Okay, good. Okay.
This is your story, not mine. Okay. But no, that's so. I'm curious about the MySpace thing. So you just ended up putting songs up, and you just noticed that your songs were getting significantly more plays than other people that you knew.
These were the days of like when blogs began to exist in a way that was like, there was the prominent, like Pitchfork existed, but there was a whole bunch of other blogs that were actually functioning as tastemakers. I think there still is that, like Brooklyn Vegan and these types of things.
Sure.
And the country world, there's like The Boot and, but this was a time when it was sort of very cool to be noticed by one of these things. And there was a blog called I Guess I'm Floating, which was, I don't think it was a really big one, but there were people who were invested in it. And they heard my MySpace and sent me a message, and I just sent them the EP like over on the internet. I just like emailed it to them. I remember like I attached the songs to individual emails and sent them to them, and then they posted it on the blog. And I said you can just give it to people for free to download, and then people downloaded it on the blog. And from that, yeah, it was like a time when that was available. And then from that, I ended up there was a movie that was starring Matthew Perry from Friends. And they had all these, they were getting a theatrical release, and they had all these Elliott Smith songs in the movie, and then they suddenly couldn't afford to pay for Elliott Smith songs. So then they had to replace them with a bunch of stuff, and I had a song called Brand New Gun, where I was very clearly ripping off Elliott Smith, and so then they licensed that to go in the movie.
Wow.
And then I thought, okay, so this is legit. Like, I feel like I should continue this. So that was encouraging enough to continue at that point.
Yeah, kind of a validating moment for you. Like,
yeah.
Obviously, it's in a film. That's pretty. Tell me about.
I mean, it was like it wasn't.
That must have been cool though.
And no, I never saw it in the theater. It was like one of those ones where it's only in like 4 cities or whatever. It was not. It was called Numb. I don't think it was a successful movie, but for me, it was like
huge.
I mean, it had an actual celebrity in it, and I felt like it was a pretty cool thing to tell my friends at the time. That's for sure.
Yeah. Did you buy the film when it came out? At least they sent you a copy. Never seen it. Never seen it.
I saw it on TV one time, and I heard my song. It's only in a very brief moment. Like
that's cool though.
But I think that that was an important lesson as well, because I think the fee that I accepted for I don't know what I accepted. I can't even remember, but it was not. It was
probably
not a lot.
Whatever they decided to give you. You're like
$250 bucks. I think it was $250. I would have been like, that's great. That's dope.
Right. But when that song got into that film, did you have your first release, the Hold Up, out already, or was that?
No,
prior?
That song ended up on the Hold Up, but that was not out yet. I had this like EP that I was selling at my covers gigs, and nobody bought it, and it was just like a folded over cardboard thing that we made in my basement. And then we were selling that, and then some of those songs ended up going on the actual first record, which also feels like it's hard for me to think of that as my first record. It wasn't like we made it ourselves. I remember shrink wrapping them myself in my basement, my basement apartment. And I remember there was like, we were eating Cheetos while shrink wrapping them, and there was a lot of cheese dust on a lot of the CDs underneath the cellophane. And we're like, that's not very professional.
That's funny. So with the Hold Up, was that obviously self-released? Did you tour on it or anything? Like, what was the shift for you? Like when you're like, okay, I can really start doing this.
I had no I didn't have any infrastructure to be able to tour at that time. I did that record, and then I just couldn't. I had like a regular day job. I remember at that time I was working at American Eagle Outfitters in a mall as a stock guy. It would have been in my 20s, my early 20s. And like people people liked the record, and there was like a small amount of people that were following me. I would play local gigs at this place called the Central, which was just like a bar where I could book my own shows and do it. I would get like 60 people. I was getting sort of like a local thing. I don't even think 60. I think that's even an exaggeration. Maybe more like 40. But they gave me the door if I did it, and the place didn't fit more than that many people, so they were happy with it. And so I would get, if I got the door on that, I would get like maybe like $300, which is pretty sweet on top of my day stuff. So I did that for a number of years. And then I released that record, The Hold Up, and then I made another record in that same fashion with a friend of mine who interned at a studio, and we would sneak in there in the middle of the night and record so we could do it for free. We just he would be like, I'll close up the shop, and then I'd sneak around the corner and we'd just stay up all night.
Yeah.
And then he'd sleep in the studio until the next day. And I mean, I'm sure they knew we were doing it, but they were just like, whatever, it's not going to amount to anything. So we made that record, and I released that other record the same way. And then really nothing came of that one as well. Same type of thing, had like a local following. And then the third one had a song on it called Put on Cologne. And this is probably over the course of like 3 or 4 years between these 3 records of just like playing bar gigs, really having, I mean, I felt like a musician, but I didn't feel like the sky was the limit or anything. I felt like this is probably something I'll do as like a hobby or.
Sure. just make a couple extra bucks at night or whatever.
Yeah, because it was sweet to be able to go to a bar and play a set and get like, you know, like $300 is pretty great.
Oh,
I like $300. Like right now, do pretty much anything for $300. Like,
right?
Like whatever somebody's got, I'll, you know. But and then the record after that one was one called "Don't Get Too Grand," and that a song off of that called "Put on Cologne" was put on CBC Radio in Canada, which is our NPR equivalent, and it went to it was like on the sort of public radio chart. It went to #1, was kind of a success on the radio here. And it's one, I mean, that's one radio station. It's a national station, but it's one radio station. And
because of the whole country gets it, right?
Yeah, the whole country gets it.
That's
so
insane.
then that record got nominated for a Juno for Folk Album of the Year, which was really very surprising. weren't expecting it in any way. It was just sort of I remember I was at I was at something where my phone was in the car, and I came back to my phone to like 197 text messages or something, and I was like, what in the fuck happened?
Yeah, right.
I didn't even know the nominations were being announced or anything. And
oh my god.
Yeah, so then after that, once you get nominated for a thing like that, whether that's, you know, the truth of it is that that's like awards nominations is silly, but it legitimizes you. Oh yeah. And I was able to get an agent and a manager off of the strength of that momentum.
Wow. Okay, so because the Juno Award is like winning a Grammy essentially in Canada, right?
Yeah. I mean, winning a Grammy is winning a Grammy in Canada. Like,
but you know what I mean? Like that's like your guys' kind of.
Oh yeah, it's the highest award you can get
for music, right?
It's and it's fancy. It makes you feel very good. It's like a big award ceremony in an arena and all that stuff. It's really, I mean, my award isn't given out in the arena part, but it's like the Grammys where there's like the night before and then there's the big TV show part. But I've never been on the TV show part. But
really, I was gonna ask you because I know you won the award for Album of the Year, right? Contemporary Roots Album of the Year later on. And
that's the night before. That was the night before. I've presented on the TV show part, but I've never performed or anything on the TV show.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I mean, it's like Shawn Mendes and stuff on there, and The Weeknd, you know what I mean?
Oh, really? I didn't know they only did just Canadian artists or something like that.
Well, both of those guys are Canadian artists. So
The Weeknd is? Oh, I didn't know that. I knew Shawn Mendes.
They both are. So they're still really big, you know, and Bieber.
Oh, so they will get the big Canadian artists to perform.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I wasn't sure if it was, but that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. So you get, but still to be nominated to win. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah. It was a real thrill. It was really a thrill. And it was really like, I mean, I didn't win the first one. I lost the first award, but just being nominated was like, you know, really legitimized me. You know, my parents got off my back and everybody my parents worried less, I think. And then everybody sort of took me seriously at that point, which was really was the big value of it for sure.
I mean, I would think even having your song on the radio and having it go #1, that must have been probably a pretty big turning point too.
Yeah, it was really exciting. I mean, it's funny how, you know, it was luck, you know, like I worked at the time I had this job at this music school. I wasn't a music teacher or anything. I just worked in the office, like scheduling things in a computer. And one of the students is friends with the guy who is the DJ on the national morning show in Canada. And one of the students had heard my record and said, I would give it to my friend. He'll like it. And then he liked the song and brought it in and gave it to the crew of people who considers it for the radio, and they put it on the radio. But, you know, the thing is just so lucky, you know, it's hard to, you know, it's hard to recommend my story as like, you know, I'm sure everybody feels that way, but it's like, it feels so lucky that it seems unrepeatable in some ways.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. With the success of that song and the Juno Award and, you know, the radio play, were you seeing your crowds getting bigger and bigger when you're playing, you know, locally, or like what was the return? There
was one, I mean, I had always been doing these. I had been linked up with around that time when I first got nominated for Juno, I'd been linked up with a promoter in the city who would throw me on opening slots for bigger bands coming through. I remember I opened for Shaky Graves when he was sort of on his way up and stuff. And he would like throw me that bone. So that was nice. I sort of like would gather some fans up that way. But really my shows were still like pretty small local shows, you know. Mm-hmm. Once I got an agent and a manager, I remember right as I started with the agent, they were like, well, let's book a show in Toronto and see how many people come. And that would have been after the Juno nomination, but before a lot of other stuff. And so we put up a show for sale at this place called the Drake Hotel in Toronto. There's no affiliation with Drake, unfortunately, but there's like a basement that's like a good room for bands to play in. And we had like, I think 330 people or something, which was
that's good,
mind-boggling to me.
Yeah.
And at that moment, I remember thinking like, okay, this feels like a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
So then after that, they started to pitch me to open for people, and I opened for a bunch of acts going across Canada. And then I figured out, that's when I learned about like opening for people, turning that into a big opportunity, like really ingratiating yourself to big audiences, selling merch at intermission, like meeting everybody who wants to meet you. I did that across Canada a couple of times and once across the US. And then when I went back out solo across Canada, we had 200 people everywhere, 300 people everywhere.
That's
instead of 50 or 60 that we saw the first
time. Sure. And then was that, you talked about touring the United States for the first time. When did you signed to Warner Chappell in 2016?
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah.
Okay. And then and did they put out Hard Settle Ain't Troubled?
Well, that was still on, that record is still just on my own label, but they published the songs on that one for sure.
Okay. So like, how did that conversation begin with them? And then what was the next step for you?
That's also a very like, so my second record, The Widowmaker, which was, nobody really liked it. And I, it's a
rad name.
Yeah, it's a cool. Yeah.
It is a cool name.
It had that going for it. A guy who was a fan of it was the bass player from the band Sugar Ray. This guy named Murphy Carges. Apparently he just likes folk music. He downloads things that he thinks look good on iTunes, or he did back then when you could download things off iTunes. And then I guess you still can, but it's coming to an end. And he just out of nowhere sent me an email, got a hold of my email somehow, and asked me to call him. And then I called him. I was like, this is all fake, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, did you think that was real?
Yeah, no, I for sure thought it was fake. And he said he was starting a publishing, and it started to sound even more fake. He said he was starting a publishing company for the football player Aaron Rodgers. And would I like to meet him about being signed to the label? Or they were signing a label with Aaron Rodgers. And I said, well, I mean, like, I was signed to this indie label, which is just basically my friend. I was like, well, I have a label. And they said, well, let's come to Nashville and meet with us. And I was like, I'm going to get mugged when I get off the plane here, probably. Sure. But I went, and it really was him. And it really was this friend of his named Paul Pontius, who was a sort of, he was a record exec. He was a guy who was responsible for Korn, I think, back in the day. And then it was Megan Trainor's A&R, and he's had tons of successes in the music industry. Really lovely guy. And I met the two of them and had conversations with them, and they said, well, if we think you're good at writing, and if we can't sign you to a label, let's try to like meet some publisher people. So they introduced me to a bunch of publishers around Nashville and got me a couple of co-writes, which I'd never done before. I did my first co-writes on that trip. I did two co-writes. I did one with a guy named Chris Roberts and another one with Marcus Hummin at Warner Chappell.
Okay.
And Marcus wrote all these Dixie Chick songs. He's an incredible writer, just like an incredible writer. Still one of my favorite songwriters in Nashville. And those were fun. And then I left. I flew back to Toronto after that, and thinking like, well, that was an interesting thing,
Were those songs that you were helping just to write for the publishing company to pitch to other people? Or
they
were
were
they
kind of
helping write for you?
Well, I didn't even really know. I was just like trying to figure out how to co-write at the time. I had no idea what it was. I remember being like just very freaked out. I'd never written anything with anybody. It was all a very private process at the time. And then so just trying to figure out how to do it was an interesting challenge. But I liked it very much. And one of the songs I wrote on that first trip, I really liked very much. And then the second, I went down again to Nashville. I drove down and wrote again. And then I wrote a song on that trip that got put on hold for Rascal Flatts.
Wow.
So then I thought like, oh, okay, I mean, I thought this is easy. I'll get jet skis and have a mansion. That'll be really fun. I felt like it was really easy, but it proved to be as challenging. It's super challenging, of course. But I felt encouraged, so I felt like I could continue doing it. So I worked with those guys and the company that Aaron Rodgers started for a while. Strangely enough.
That's interesting. I didn't know he was in the music industry. Apparently, he is.
He was very briefly.
Oh, okay.
He's a big music guy, big music fan. That company has since stopped, but it was a good opportunity to get sort of my feet wet. And then after that, once that deal ended, I signed with Warner Chappell about, I think, 4 years later.
Okay, so you signed with Warner Chappell, and they put out your records from there on out, both ways. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So tell me about that. So now you're signed to Warner. Are you still you're still in Canada, right?
I still live in Toronto. Well, I have a place in Nashville. I haven't been there since February. I don't know I can't imagine. Are you in Nashville right now? You are, right?
No, we're in San Diego.
Oh, California. San Diego, of course. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I don't know what's going on in my place. I was going to ask you to go by and look at my place because
I would actually, dude.
I'm just kidding.
We're actually going to move there. We've been trying to.
Oh, nice.
We were trying to move there before the pandemic hit, and then we were going to go check it out and everything, and then obviously that threw
a
wrench and everything.
It's very livable city.
Yeah. Do you live in the actual Nashville, or do you live on the outskirts?
I live in I rent a small place in Sylvan Park. That's where it's like west side of Nashville.
Oh, cool. Nice.
But my house, my family all lives in Toronto here. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Right on. Yeah. All right. Well, tell me. Okay, so then you put out. You had a huge song, Portland, Maine. I know that was it's still a huge song for you.
Yeah.
Tell me about that one.
Well, I wrote that on one of my first, probably the third or fourth trip to Nashville. I got set up with a guy who I wrote that with, this guy named Abe Staklasa, who I'd never met at the time. And a publisher named Steve Markland, who was at Warner Chappell at that time. Now he works at Downtown. He thought we would do well together. I remember hearing a demo of Abe and thinking that he was an old man because his voice is like, it's the strangest. I mean, it's beautiful, but it's like, it doesn't sound like the guy that it belongs to. And so I met up with him, and the first thing, I had this idea for the song Portland, Maine, based on all these missed calls I was getting on this American cell phone number I was using, thinking about and realizing there were two Portlands. I had not thought of that until I was in America, getting weird phone calls from Portland, Maine.
Oh, were just, because of Portland, Oregon. That's the only one you were aware of. Okay.
All I knew was,
yeah, I got you.
But there's two.
Right.
But, so I sort of had that little idea, and he got it, and we wrote it really very quickly. And I remember it was the day I was leaving town. I remember being in the Nashville airport, listening to the voice memo of it and thinking, like, this is really good. And it was sort of the first co-written song that I wrote that I thought was good. And I was just happy that had something. And then somebody at his publisher, Abe, I don't think he was signed with Big Yellow Dog yet, but he was working on being signed somewhere to a publisher. And they pitched it to Tim McGraw, and Tim McGraw said he would cut it. But it took from when he said he would cut it to when we heard that he actually did, it was like 2 years. So in that amount of time, I had recorded it and put it out, and so it's had kind of a journey.
Yeah. How does that work? If you don't mind me asking, like with a song like that, like, so you write Portland, Maine, you are one of the writers, you write the song, and then he wants to use it, or he puts it on hold. You can still then go out and record it and put it out yourself, or is there weird?
I had recorded it. I didn't put it out until after he put it out, sort of as a courtesy. I had recorded a version of it already. We did a demo version, and I recorded a version of it. And as a courtesy to the person who's got it on hold, you wait till they put it out. But I mean, like, I don't think Tim McGraw cares if a folk artist from Canada puts out the thing.
He's not.
I don't think he's worried about the competition coming from north of the border in any way.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know if that was a thing where if you put it out, then he's gonna be like, you know, then it could potentially be, look, Tim McGraw ripped off this guy out of Canada. I don't know if it
I think like everybody's so
that far.
But you know, so as a courtesy, you always let the person release it first, I think, is the rule. Although people do break that rule. But and then after he put it out, I decided to put up my version as well, and it's been, it's just streamed really well. People really like it on the streaming services. It seems to work really well in that way.
Yeah, definitely. The next record you put out, Both Ways, what was the milestone from that album?
You know, like it was like that was sort of the first record that I got to sort of have an uncompromising kind of vision on. Like I had enough money to take my time and make it. I had enough time to write it. And I co-wrote some of the songs. I think 4 or 5 of them are written all 100% by me. And then the other ones were co-written. So it was the first time I had included co-writes on a record. And then I just felt like it was like the first time I ever got to do the exact thing that I wanted to do. You know, I wasn't under any time pressure, and I knew what I wanted to do, and I did it. So, and it did well in Canada, and it did pretty well, and we got some attention in America and in some, you know, in Rolling Stone and stuff. And then it won the Roots album of the year. Yeah, which is a really big. When I listen back to it now, I hear a guy who's really desperate to be praised. I hear like, you know, a guy who, and it was true. It was just like, it felt like, okay, this is the album where I have to be really on it. I got to be really lovable here. It sounds like that now when I listen to it, but I think it's a good record.
I think you accomplished that. I mean, to have the time to spend on the album and do it the way you want, and then have it, you know, win a Juno Award. I mean, that's pretty...
it was really, really gratifying, and really by that point that it won, it was 2019. I have agents and manager, and you know, agents in 3 different countries, and so and I've been working with a publicist for many years, so it really is gratifying that everybody gets to win it. You know, all the producer, all the people who played on it. It really is it's just fun to be able to say thanks to everybody and send a message that's like, hey, the thing that we were trying to do, we did just that. You know, it was really nice that way.
That's very cool. And then the other way was just more stripped down renditions of the same songs, correct?
Yeah, just an acoustic version of that
same record. Okay. And you have a new album coming out next month.
Yeah, in November, on November 6th, I got a record called Without People coming out.
Cool.
Which is
I want to talk about that. But before we get to that one, tell me about how coronavirus affected you directly. Like, did you have that record done? Were you recording that album when it hit? Were you on the road?
We had done all the pre-production in January and February of this year, and then the plan was the back half of March to record it. So we got 1 day in the studio, and then in 2 days after in Canada, they put out the sort of stay-at-home order thing, so we couldn't go back in, and we just did it all. I mean, everybody's set up to work that way these days. It's not uncommon that everybody's got that stuff in their studio to be able to, you know, we just Zoomed with people, and people worked in their own studio, and then they sent us the parts, and we sort of gathered it up in that way.
So this whole record was constructed almost that way.
Pretty close. We got one song. There's 2 songs that include some studio days, and the rest of it was made in the producer's house and in all the other musicians' houses, and then all put together. So on the credits, the list of studios is like a whole paragraph long with everybody's house, and then we force everybody to give their bedroom a studio name.
I was gonna ask you that. Did everyone have a name, or was it like Donovan's living room?
My friend Travis had to invent a studio name, and you know, it's a fun exercise, especially when you text somebody and say, hey, you need to name your studio, and I need a name in 45 seconds, you know, to see, to see what they come up with is a thrill.
It's going in the credits.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, then you obviously had the songs and the demos kind of there, right? When you have to teach them to everybody else. And
I do all my parts first. Like the general way that I work with my producers, a guy named James Bunton, he lives here in Toronto as well, is I'm sort of always gathering up songs for the time period between the last record and this one. And I have a good sense of what I want to use before we go in there. I'm not one of those, I think that those people who are like, we recorded or we wrote 100 songs and we cut it down to 5. It's just like, no, you fucking didn't. Nobody wrote 100 songs. It's just like all that. It's posturing, and I don't do that. I think we cut 2 songs off of this because they weren't good enough, and I would have been able to tell you from the beginning that they were probably not going to be good enough. Like, I had a feeling,
right?
And then the rest of it just went on the record. So I'm not one of those people who, I don't even think anybody does that. I think we have a fantasy that that's something that like
that happens.
Well, we all love the idea of like Bon Iver going to the cabin and writing. I wrote 100 songs. Well, like it's a thrill. It's a thrill to think about that. Not very many people are actually prolific, I don't think.
Sure.
Anyway, yeah. So I knew it was going to be on there, and I record my guitar parts, and then we build the whole things out kind of just in the instruments that we have in the studio, and then we send them out to the musicians and say, okay, put the real drums on this. Here's what we built. Here's what we want it to feel like. Just play the real ones. Yeah, and then they give them some freedom to do what they want to do in the space, and it's resulted in some fun new types of sounds on this record for sure.
Yeah. Do you think that there are elements and things that made the record this time around that wouldn't have happened if it was recorded in a regular studio setting?
Yeah, definitely. And the reasons are, very practical. And that in the studio, I'm really thinking about schedule a lot of the time because the studio is really expensive. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking about, when someone's trying some adventurous thing, we do one take of it. And if it doesn't work, I go, okay, stop this. Like this is going to cost me like $600.
Time is money
to try this nonsense. So like, let's just move on from it. And in this circumstance we actually worked in, there was time for people we'd say like, just do a whole bunch of takes and send us everything. Just like send us every little weird thing you do. Mm-hmm. So a lot of those, I remember there's a song called We Used To, where we sent it to my drummer percussionist, and we said, just like put a ton of shit on this. It's as much as you can do. He sent us back everything, and we used all of it. It's all in there.
Oh, wow.
And when he heard it, he was like, you used all of that? Like he just thought we'd pick and choose. But, those things that happened would not have happened in a studio setting. That's for sure.
That's awesome. Sorry, 1 second. There we go. Sorry, my computer all glitched out there for a hot second.
All good.
Awesome. Yeah. So tell me. Okay. So yeah, definitely they would take. Yeah, that's cool. So you got to pick through, his whole mess of whatever he decided to go through and play on that record, and you have just a bunch of different choices there. Essentially, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, a whole bunch of just different options, and everybody's just in their own rooms and not feeling pressured, or
mm-hmm.
They're feeling in a safe space so they can try adventurous things, which is
you kind of have all the time in the world, so to speak. If you're not, yeah.
I mean, and everybody was just grateful to have something to work on because we were all so bored, So it was, it really worked out really interestingly.
And with this record, like music videos and stuff, I know you've done one at least. Was that something that was filmed, while everybody was still locked in? Or like, how did you guys do those?
We did a video for a song "Grew Apart." That song came out sort of really early. It mm-hmm. came out in January, so we shot the video before any of this happened. Yeah, and then a lot of our content, there's people, so we got a project where we're farming a lot of the songs out to other artists to make content for them, to make paintings and dance routines for them.
Yeah, I did see that. Tell me a little bit about that. That's cool.
Yeah, like we just felt like, looking at the budget to advertise thing, everybody's priorities are shifting so much at a time like this, when it's like a global pandemic and there's the most significant human rights movement going on that we've ever experienced. Mm-hmm. I think like looking at a budget sheet and seeing, like the amount of money that we spend to put my face on bus shelters in Canada, I was just like, is that really the best use of this money right now? Or like, everybody's in such a bad, like, right when I'm being advertised stuff right now in the middle of this pandemic, it's hard to be like, now's the time to switch my detergent over to it. You know, it's just like nobody,
right.
nobody gives a shit about advertising right now. We just thought it was a good opportunity to be able to hire some creators, especially at a time when a lot of artists are struggling and trying to get their industry back, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It was a really good time to hire some people to just make some content for us. So that's what we decided to do.
That's amazing. And you have a live stream event coming up too, right? Supporting the record.
Yeah. I play in an empty theater here in Toronto, which is
talked about that. So it was just film. It was filmed prior. You're going to air it coming up.
Yeah, we're going to air it on the 5th. Yeah. It was spooky. It was like, you know, I didn't see anybody. I just walked in and they had everything all set up and there's cameras were all operated remotely. I spoke to one person and then I went out and played.
Just yourself? Acoustic?
Or yeah, just me. Just me alone, acoustic in this sort of, you know, it's a hall for, I think it's 3,200 seats and it was just not a soul in there. And I'll tell you, it's like, you know, I mean, there's the interesting thing about the pandemic is, you know, so much, we all are doing so many live stream concerts, online stuff. The real interesting feeling of those live stream things is when you finish a song, the profundity of the silence is like, you know, you are reminded very starkly that you're alone in a room. So like, you know, when you're in a room that's meant for 3,200 people and you're alone in there, the silence is even more pathetic. I think I laughed at the end of every song because it just,
you're just like,
felt so incredibly anticlimactic, you know.
Sure.
You have to be like, people will watch this. People at some point, people will be seeing this, but no one is seeing it right now.
Right.
And that's okay. It's an interesting thing to deal with.
Was it like, did you have to do like banter in between songs, or was it like a full set, or was it just like, I'm gonna play a song, stop, okay, we're gonna cut to the next one?
It's like a full set. We did it in 3 blocks of sets, so I wouldn't have to, you know, it didn't feel too strange. But yeah, like I did banter. I tried to talk about like as much as you can do banter to empty seats, you know. Sure. Like I tried. I don't know. We'll see what people think. But I mean, there are moments when it is weird. I'll tell you that.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Donovan, for talking with me today, dude. I really appreciate it.
No problem, Adam. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I do have one more question.
Sure.
I can't wait to hear the record when it comes out in like a week, next week, right?
Pretty soon, yeah.
Yeah, crazy. Can't believe it's almost November.
I know, it's so weird, right?
Yeah. Do you have any advice for aspiring artists?
I think what I always say is, you know, like I said in talking about my story of how to get there, I think like there's so much luck involved and there's so many things you can't control that you're just going to have to wait around for. So like, be okay with waiting around. Don't feel like that's losing, and use that time. I mean, every building in Nashville, every cool guy record building in Los Angeles is filled with a bunch of people who aren't fucking there unless people are writing songs that make people feel things. There's a real granular, like it is real. People love good songs. They are you need them. They need them desperately. Everybody needs it desperately. Get really good at writing good songs. Try to write good songs as much as you can. There's so many resources for kids these days. Everybody's got GarageBand on their computer. Everybody can get something on a Mac, anything or on a PC, something that can record and start figuring out how to do that and start making something that sounds like nobody but you, and focus on that. There's like a million things you can waste your time doing, like buying download cards or whatever the hell people do these days, you know, making your Instagram look really... one good song makes all of that stuff completely and totally useless. And none of those cool gatekeepers or guys wearing sunglasses inside of bars have a job if it's not for people in their bedrooms making something unique. So like, take the time before your career starts. Don't feel like it's just waiting around. That's the time you make yourself sound really good. That's the time you make up a thing that nobody else can do. Bringing it backward.